Why I am against protests. Hello everyone, welcome to another video. Finally, I want to explain why, not only from an intelligence and propaganda perspective, but from my own personal perspective, I am against protests. And when I say protests, I mean demonstrations on the street. Now, I know many people came here because of my video talking about how I got tricked by pro-Palestinian propaganda, but even when I was pro-Palestinian, I still never attended any kind of protest or any kinds of demonstrations because I simply don't think that they are the solution. But let's get on to this video so you can understand my logic behind all of this. And of course, if you're somebody who thinks that protests are a good thing, feel free to leave your opinion in the comments below. Now, let's get to the topic of this video. First of all, we live in a world where for every action you have a reaction. And when you have protests, which is a large number of people that are disrupting something, they're disrupting a city, usually capitals, or is always a big city where you choose to protest. You have suddenly businesses being disrupted, transportation being disrupted, and these disruptions, they don't always bring positive results to the people. More often than not, protests actually cause more harm than they do good, as we have seen with all these pro-Palestinian protests that seem to be disrupting the environment. We saw this with the situation with George Floyd in the past. We saw this several times. But let's look now from the intelligence and propaganda perspective. So throughout history, protests, they have been used as a manipulation technique where you convince crowds of people to act a certain way to push a certain agenda. Let me give you an excellent example of this. So in the 1920s, a guy called Edward Bernays, who is known as the father of modern propaganda, he was hired by a tobacco company that told him that they wanted to double their profits because only men were smoking, women were not. At the time, for women to smoke, it was completely frowned upon, so you wouldn't think that that would happen. So what Edward Bernays done was very simple. He paid a few models to go on the streets on a protest, holding cigarettes as torches of freedom. Because feminism was on the rise, he knew exactly which narrative to employ, so these women would showcase to other women who were watching from the streets. Later on, photographs were taken and put on the newspaper to showcase to women that, look, if you want to fight against the patriarchy, you should light a cigarette and start smoking. So this simple act, this manipulation, where Edward Bernays paid the women to go on the streets and do that, this ended up triggering a whole new movement where women started smoking. Now, another great example is, during the 1950s, the British government wasn't happy with the fact that Nasser was ruling Egypt. Now, this is not to say he was a good ruler or not, but it's the fact that intelligence services in the UK made use of the BBC to transmit propaganda through the radio to Egyptians to push for them to go on the streets and campaign against Nasser. So what I'm trying to say here is not whether protests are good or not, but just simply that you should keep in mind that most protests, they're happening because somebody has an agenda behind, because somebody managed to create an organization, managed to convince groups of people that they need to go on the streets, cause disruption on the environment to push a certain cause. And we know that sometimes these disruptions are so severe that they lead the government to create rules and make restrictions tighter to people because of street demonstrations. So personally, from my point of view, as somebody who's always studying about intelligence, politics, and propaganda, I can tell you that oftentimes you have intelligence agencies or spying secret agencies using or behind the curtains, and it could even be a corporation, for example, as we've seen with the case of Edward Bernays and the cigarettes. So you have big institutions that are very powerful and they're trying to sway public opinion towards a direction. Now, one of the easiest ways to do this is not just by broadcasting propaganda everywhere, because people a lot of times, they are aware of propaganda being propaganda. So an even better way is to use the mutual human trust, where if you see other humans, other fellow individuals that think the same way as you do, if you see them on the street fighting for a cause, you're more likely to join them and believe that they're doing it for a genuine cause instead of just being manipulated by a specific group. In my personal opinion, a very clear example of this are the pro-Palestinian protests, because they, as I've discussed on this channel before, they are not doing this because they care about humanity and because they care about genocide. They are doing this because they want to cause disruption in the West. How do they cause disruption? Like I said, by disrupting the local environment. So if you have a big city, suddenly you have traffic jams, suddenly you have streets being closed, suddenly you have people getting violent here and there. So these protests that have been happening for years or even decades already in the West, they are causing, as we've seen on countless videos and images, disruption on a high level. This disruption can later be used as an excuse for the government to tighten rules of control and claim, because people are out on the streets protesting too much, we're now going to put tighter rules, we're now going to put curfews, we're now going to put the requirement of digital ID so we can track and use facial recognition to find out who is on the streets protesting. So in my personal opinion, protests, they are no good, they are no help, and they ended up instead causing the opposite effect, bringing harm to the population. So now you're going to ask me, okay, well, if you're against protests, then what are the ways that the people can fight for change in the world? So let me tell you, there are 3 ways I believe people can fight for change in the world. The first one is by being rich. I know many people are not gonna like this, and especially leftists, they'll say like, well, being rich is wrong. No, it's not. If you're rich, you can fight with your money. You can use your money to sponsor or to fund whatever you think is right for the world. So yes, being rich is one way that you can generally make a difference. The second way is by being a politician or a civil servant, somebody in a public role in the world, where if you are a politician, if you are a civil servant, if you're working with laws, you can then propose laws that will improve the world for the better, of course. And the third way, and that's not to say that I support politicians, I actually think that most things are a massive circus, but okay. And the third way is to be a respectable person in your community. Now, this doesn't need to be politics. This could be perhaps religious. You lead a religious group. You're the pastor of a church, or you're the rabbi of a synagogue. Or this could be you are a respectable member on your local society and people respect you, and with that, you can actually make change. So for me, these are the only 3 genuine ways that you can make change. Protests, they do nothing, as we've seen. Even people protesting against digital ID. Tommy Robinson brought 3 million people on the streets in London not too long ago to protest against all this illegal immigration. And as we see, nothing gets done. Nothing gets done by the government. On the contrary, sometimes they even use that against the people. So now you know why I am against protests, why I don't participate, because I don't want to be, as we say in Portuguese, massa de manobra. I don't want to be part of the mass that is used to maneuver people towards a specific agenda. And as we've seen with Bernal, this has always worked very well. Now, for this video, I'll recommend 2 excellent books. The first is Propaganda, written by Bernal himself. So read this to understand how propaganda manipulates things even before you would even imagine that they are doing it so. And the second book is by one of my favorite academics in the field of intelligence, Rory Cormac, Disrupt and Deny. This book explains very well and cites examples of when British intelligence services wanted a specific leader of a specific nation to be removed from power, and then they used techniques of covert action, propaganda, to forward that. And as I mentioned, yes, it is very common to trigger the people to go on the streets and get them to do the dirty work when the goal is not even the benefit of the people that are protesting, but actually a hidden agenda that governments or corporations want to pass forward. So I hope I have made my point clear. Thank you very much to all the new subscribers in this channel, and I hope you enjoy my content, and I'll be bringing more information on intelligence and propaganda on this channel. So please leave your like, your comment, and subscribe, and I wish you all a great day.